Hello. In this video, I wanted to show how to uh, use Snowflake's capability of querying semi-structured data, such as JSON, to query the files that are created by Azure Event Hub Capture in Azure Blob Storage. And basically what Event Hub's Capture does is it creates Avro files. And because Snowflake supports Avro files, we can query and load this data into a table to be able to easily process it without writing custom code. What we will do is we will take the Azure Event Grid, we'll configure Blob Storage notifications, which will send messages to Event Hub containing this type of data. Basically, for each event, it will come in with this type of a data, and we will parse out some interesting fields such as the ID, the subject, and we'll be able to query it. The reason it could be convenient is if, let's say, you're doing some event capture and you need to see how many files changed in a certain space. This will allow us to do this pretty quickly. So let's get started. So first thing we'll do is I'll use the CLI commands to make it a little easier. We'll create a resource group in East-West region. And inside of the resource group, we will create a storage account. So we'll create a storage account in the resource group we created called AV files 1, make it standard, same region, and Gen 2 storage. Okay. Then on that storage account, the reason I'm using CLI instead of the portal UI is just a little faster than going in the UI. We'll go in the UI and take a look at it there as well. The next thing we'll do is we'll create the container inside of the storage account. So we'll create a container called my files in that storage account. And we'll also create a queue. So what we'll do is we'll use Event Grid to send events to both Event Hub and Event Grid and the queue, and we'll compare them just to show how it looks. So this is the storage container that got created, and let's just create a queue called Q1, and then we'll go and explore this in the portal real quickly. So this creates the queue. So once the queue is created, let's just see how it looks. So we created our resource group, and in resource group we have an account, and I'll delete it afterwards. I'll be showing secrets just fine here. And we created a queue, it's there, and we also created a container that's empty right now, okay? And we should be able to see the same thing inside of the Microsoft Storage Explorer. For convenience, sometimes we will be using this to explore things. So that's my blob container, and that's the data there. Great. As a next step, we will create another storage account that we'll use for capturing. And the reason we'll use a separate one so that not to confuse the files that are getting uploaded and generate notifications with the files that the Avro files that the Event Hub creates. So we'll create a storage account. And inside of the storage account, we'll create a container for capturing files. So it's a second storage account. And let's explore how it looks. So we'll go back to the resource group and we'll see, that's where we upload files and that's where the captured Avro files will be. So just to separate the two to make it easier to understand what we're doing. Okay, so it's created the container. At this time, let's also create an Event Hub namespace. Again, I'm just using the PowerShell to make it easier. So that's creating an Event Hub namespace. Okay, so the namespace got created, and inside of the namespace, let's actually create the Event Hub. Again, just pointing to the resource group, the name of the Event Hub, and the Event Hub namespace that we just created. And we can see now in the portal, we have the namespace, and there is no Event Hub yet, but in a second it will appear here, right there, and we will configure capture soon. Okay, so for this step, we'll use the portal. So we'll go to the Event Hub, we'll click on capture, we'll say on, We'll minimize the time window and the file size so it's easier for us to test. So at every minute we'll generate a file, or after 10 megabytes it will generate a file. We'll select the container we just created. So I think it will be here, my capture, select. All of this is also possible with CLI. We'll store them in this format, okay, and we'll save the changes. So as the next step, let's go to the file storage account, and instead of configuring for the first subscription using the UI, the event subscription, let's configure it using CLI command. So what I will do first is I'll grab the storage account resource ID, and then as you can see, we also have the queue service ID right here. We'll just need to append the queue for ourselves. So let's now create a subscription using the Event Hub CLI commands, and you need the Event Hub CLI extension for it. So I'm just going to copy the command here, and we'll look into that. So we have the event grid subscription create, pointing to the storage account, calling this subscription blob to queue. So every blob event going to queue, and endpoint will be storage queue type, and endpoint will be pointing to the Q1 that we created. Let's see how that looks. So the command completed. And if you look in the portal under events of that account, we can now see blob to queue, endpoint is storage queue, and it's pointing exactly to the storage queue we want. For the second subscription, we'll create two subscriptions. We'll add another event subscription. We'll give it a name blob to event hub. We'll keep the default schema, and we'll switch the endpoint type to be event hub. And we'll select an endpoint here from the resource group. So in this case, instead of doing it through CLI, we're just doing it in UI, and the confirm selection and create. No filters and no additional features. So every single event will go there. Okay, so now we have two subscriptions defined, one for blob queue and one for blob to event hub. So everything that we will put in the storage account will generate an event grid notification and will send identical data to both of these destinations. Okay. So now looking at the storage account, we see it's empty. So let's generate, so the event hub account is empty, but contains, every second it will create an empty Avro file here because nothing is being actually captured right now. So they're all basically empty files, but it generates it every time period as we define. And then for the files, we will upload some files and we'll generate some data. So let's see. So in the files, it's empty right now. So let's try to generate some data inside of those files right now. So I'll try to upload a few files using the CLI command, storage upload batch to my account, destination path files. Hopefully that points to the container from this directory, and let's see if this uploads correctly. So the command as I pasted it, it didn't work because I think this destination path needs to be destination D. So let's try it again. Let's see if it's uploading right now. So we can see some files appeared in the container. It's sending them there now. Okay, so we uploaded a whole bunch of files. Let's just double check what they look like. You can see some subfolders and some files got created. Great. Let's now upload one more container to generate a little bit more data. And let's try to upload from this location. There's going to be quite a lot of files there. So right now it's uploading just a whole bunch of Python files on purpose, just to generate every one of those will generate an event through the event grid to the to destination. So you can see the DLLs are being uploaded. The docs are being uploaded. Great. Let's go to the portal for a second and let's take a look at what we see here. Soon we'll start seeing events appearing under the event group subscription. It's because the files are being created. So under blobs, my files, we can see the same files are flowing through. And then while we're waiting for the files to be uploaded, which are still happening, right? Let's see, it's still going. There's a couple thousand files there on purpose. Let's look if the queue right over here is getting data. And you can see, yes, it is, right? So there is right now 513 messages in the queue. And if we refresh, we can see 637, 648, 656. So we're uploading the data, and each event is generating a queue message through because event grid is sending. And then if we double click on it, we can see here the contents of this message is this JSON schema, right? With the subject pointing to the actual file, what event it was, when it got created, what its unique ID was, etc. And those are getting generated right now. So you can see we're at 900 events there, and we'll see if our captured files here, which are very hard to look at manually, right? Right here, you can't look at them because they are all within Avro files, 1 per second per minute granularity. They're sitting there, and we will want to query them. So obviously we can do a Databricks cluster, but in this example, I want to show you how to do it with Snowflake. Okay, so files are still being generated and uploaded. Let's see where we are at, 1300, and the upload is still going. So we will, while it's going, we will proceed to starting it look at Snowflake. So we'll go with the Snowflake step by step. I opened my account at Snowflake, opened a new tab under worksheets, called it event groups capture. So what I will do is I already have a database called testdb, so we will use that database. Control Enter will run this command. Okay, and I will now create, I know that the format of these of the files is Avro, so I'll create a file format, give it a name AV Avro format of type Avro, no compression. That corresponds to the format of the files. Okay, so it created it, and I will show file formats so I can see what are my file formats. And you can see right there is my file format for Avro file. Okay, and then what I will do is I will create a capture, a stage pointer to a location where my files are, right? So I will call this, well, I just keep the name, that's fine. AV event grid capture. This needs to point to the storage account, AV my capture one, I think. Let's just double check. My capture one, that's the storage account. And then this is the container name, my capture. Now we also need the Azure SaaS token for this, the credential through which we will access. So we'll have many ways to generate it, but I will just generate a access signature right here. And for the container, we'll make it available for a few days. Read list permissions, create, and we'll copy this query string. Okay. And then we will use this query string inside of the command right here. Okay, and we'll say that the files inside of that are AV Avro format. So we created a stage right now. So what does that mean? That means we can try to list files that are right now there using Snowflake syntax for listing, right? So if you remember, we looked at all these files, and you can see there's some files that are kind of empty, and you can see their full paths here. So this is Snowflake being able to read the files and show us the sizes of these files. And you can see some files have data, some files don't have data. And this is where they're stored. That's the name of the files that are based on the syntax of the capture that I said, right? Point it and put it inside of the partition year, month, date, etc. Great. Now let's see how many records total do we have inside of these files. So I'm running just this command, Control Enter is how I ran it. And while we're running it, we can see the files are still being copied. So this is supposed to change. And you can see over here, it's telling me no active warehouse is selected for this session. So I will select a small, tiny, small warehouse. And it will auto start this warehouse because it needs a warehouse to run. So what it looks like right here is that the warehouse cannot be resumed because in my account I exceeded the monthly quota. So I'll go figure out what to do with it and we'll look at it later because I can't resume the warehouse, but we'll keep all of the data prepared for us to continue with it. So let's just double check. It finished uploading the files. Okay. And we can see that the queue got a total of 9478 messages. And hopefully we have the same thing in the capture. We can't view that data. We can see how many files there are. So let's just double check how many files there are. 300 files, but I can't run this count command because the warehouse cannot be resumed. I will go figure out what to do with the warehouse, but for now, there's because there is cost to running some of these components, what I will do is I will actually, since we're done uploading data, I will actually go and delete the event hub. So the event hub that we have here, I will just get rid of it because we already generated all of the data. You can see right here, the data is already sitting in storage, so we don't need it for the further example. And after I get my credit situation resolved, I will show how to query the data in those captured files because I'll just keep them there until that point. Thanks. Okay, so I think I got the issue resolved with the inability to restart the warehouse. I have my little warehouse running and still pointing to the same stage. We can now see and count the number of records that we have in these files, 9478. And these are the files that we have, 120 files right now. You can see again, some files have data and some don't. We'll get back to it in a second. What I did is I also reconfigured back the capture to go again through Event Hub so we can, when we delete things, we can see them deleting. And then as well, you can compare and see that right here we have the same amount, 9478, which is comparable to what we see in the worksheet here when we query the sum of records inside of each file, right? It's also the same, okay? So as a next step, let's try to see what's inside of each file, okay? So for that, we will pick one of the files. Let's pick file with data. Let's say this one, and we'll take its path and we'll kind of zoom in into that file right now. So we got the file name here, and because the stage is defined up to this part, this is our stage, so I replace that with the stage name, and then we'll try to query and see what records can we extract from this Avro file. Need to comment this part out. And we can see the data, right? So there's an Avro file, and the Avro file has how many records? 169 records, and each record has this data set as a body hex encoded, and then it has the enqueue time, the offset, and then different properties of that Avro file. All of these, this is, for example, where it came from, etc. So this data is part of the Avro record, each record inside of the file, with the body encoding the actual message. So what format is this in? This is the Event Hub Avro message format from the. So where can we see more information about this format is basically on the capture documentation page. You can see that the schema is a sequence number. This is for the Event Hub capture, the sequence number, the offset and queue time and properties, and the body is hex encoded, right? So again, just looking back at this data, and you can see right there, properties, and then the body is hex encoded. So we know that the body is hex encoded, and this is the message that should contain data that looks like this event. So let's see if we can decode some of this message. We'll use Snowflake built-in hex decode string body, right? Right there. So we're going to point it to this JSON. Each one is a JSON. We'll point it to the body property, and we'll do a select and see what these look like, right? So let's see what these look like. And we can see that the body got decoded. And inside of the body, we have our payload. And this payload format matches this right here, okay, which is the blob created event. You can see which file got uploaded, etc. So now we have a way to, let's just recap, we have a way to see all of the files. We have to look inside, we have a way to look inside of a specific file and get some of the data out. Now let's get a couple of the other interesting fields, such as the enqueue time, the offset, the sequence, etc. So for that, we'll have a query like this again, hex decode get the body, then get the enqueue time, which we saw as a property of this. So you can again, just to get back, we're going to get this enqueue time and we're going to convert it to timestamp. We're going to get the offset, we're going to get the properties, we're going to get the sequence number and system properties. And we're going to select it from one file just as an example. So now instead of just seeing the body, we'll actually see a few more things. And see, so with Snowflake, we're able to parse that Avro file very nicely. There is our body. This is when it got enqueued and all the other information, right? Okay. As next step, let's create a table structure in which we can put this data in Snowflake. So I'll just copy here a little script that I created. So basically we'll create a table, capture, will JSON text variant. So that will be our body. And queue time will be a timestamp, offset, properties, sequence number, and system properties, right? So we're just going to create a table like so. And this table got created. And we can see it's right now empty. So inside of this table now, we will be able to insert some data and then query that data from that table. So in this little snippet of code, what we got is we are copying into the table that we just defined. And what we're doing is we are copying from the select statement that we created above. But instead of looking at a specific file, we actually going to look at all of the files. Let's just double check how many records we got. 9478. And how many files? Some of them are empty, that's why, okay, 156. So once we run this statement, we will actually load data into this table that's currently empty, okay? So let's give it a second to run. And you can see it finished running. And what Snowflake did is it outputted the files that it loaded, and it remembered which files got loaded, right there, how many rows were in each file. And what it means is if we run this again, it will not load anything anymore because it remembers what it loaded. But as files get created, and we'll see that soon, it will load them again and again. Now let's take a look at what's in the table. We can see 9478 rows right here. So that matches what we saw before. And also we see now the offsets and all of the messages, but really what we care about is kind of in this first column. The rest is just for fun. So you can see inside of each one is a blob that got created, and what's inside of it is an array of events that look like that format described here. So now that we have the data in the table, what if we want to do some more complex queries and parse out some interesting information about this. That's kind of the point of this exercise. So let's say we want to select the Microsoft Storage events. Okay, so what we are going to do is we're going to look at this data set and let's just copy this slice of data for now right here. So that's how the raw data looks. And let's see what we're going to try to parse out. So because the data is inside of this array structure, even though there's sometimes only one record of this object, we are going to do a lateral flatten. So Snowflake documentation describes how it works. We're basically going to take the arrays and convert them, and then we're going to get a value back, and this value will be pointing to each one of these. So if we want to see it in action, let's just simplify this query a little bit and look at it piece by piece. So if I ran this query just like that, so what does lateral flatten do? It basically takes the JSON text and if it's an array, it breaks it into separate rows. It will create separate rows. So all of these columns right here are the same columns I had in the original table. And this value column is what got created for me. And you notice it removed the array around it. It made it one object. And then that's the original entry is referred to as this, right? So if I only select the value, which we care about, is you will see now we have the non-array based events. And now using Snowflake's Java parsing, Java's JSON parsing syntax, what I can do is I can just point to properties here. So if I say value slash data, colon data, you can see it will pick the data array colon API, and you can see it will pick that part of it right there. So this is a simplistic query, but using it a little bit more, we can see, so basically extending so grabbing from the value the event type, converting it to string as event type, event time, subject, right? So over here is our subject, that's the actual blob, and the ID right there, that's the ID of the event that got generated and went both into Event Hub and into the table. So now if we get rid of this component and just run that query, what we'll get is a list, a nice clean list of every event. And how easy it is to parse it is what's the key point here, is that it was relatively easy to parse and see exactly which files got created, what the event IDs are. So let's take a look at some of these event IDs and just do a quick comparison to see if we can find those inside um, of the queue. So let's just take one event from the queue. Let's pick its ID right there. And it's talking about this MS file right there. So let's just query that and see. And so the syntax would be value ID string equals in single quotes the ID. So we can see in the event hub events that we parsed, if the same event is present, and we can see it's right here, the same file we're referring to in both cases. So both places got the same data with the same event ID passing between them. Okay, so at this point, we are able to easily query these events, store this into another table if we so choose, and by repeating this run right here, we can see that there were a few more files got created, but there are no rows loaded in each of them because event capture creates a file every minute. We told it to do. But because we're not modifying files, there is no more data. So the same data set remains as it was. Okay. So as the next step, let's create a, just to show why it's convenient, we can create a grouping query on top of the same events to see how they were coming in and files were being changed. So we are going to take the event timestamp, get the hour of it, just for fun only, the event type and event count, and see that how it looks by hour, right? And because everything happened in the same hour, we got everything with the same hour. Let's just try a minute here, just for fun, and you can see these are the minutes of that hour yesterday that I was loading the data right here, and all of them are blob created events. Okay, so let's see how it looks if we do some deletions. Okay, so we notice now we have this many messages. We are going to the files. Let's just remove one file from here. So the file is deleted. Okay, and then if we refresh the queue, after the delete completes, you can see 9479 got increased. Okay, and if we look in the data set, if we run this, we're not expecting to see the data there yet, right? This will still be the old number because the data didn't yet get processed. But if we rerun the capture, and because again it creates a capture file only once per minute, right? So we need to wait for this capture file to be created, and kind of we can just rerun this query every time until we get the data. And you can see right there, created a data file right there. Why are there three files got created is because they're for different seconds of that minute when we spit the data out. That's how we configured it. So we can see now, and if we run this query, we can see the blob deleted event just now, right? So it's a convenient way to debug things with the blob events by putting them and using Snowflake to parse things out. So just as a final fun thing, let's remove a whole bunch of events, a whole bunch of blobs. Actually, let's just remove them all. So right now it's going to do a discovery, which will be many blobs, and it will start deleting them. So 13 deleted, 200 deleted, right? So it's deleting them. And as it's deleting them, it's generating events very quickly that go into the queue. And they also very quickly go into the event hub itself. So if we look in the event hub, they go there extremely quickly. Right there, they will be coming in right now, but they don't appear in the capture for a little bit of time because capture is spitting files only every 1 minute. So let's also look at these events here, how it looks. So you can see it's spiking, and then as we wait and a few minutes pass, it will create more and more events. So let's see, refresh the queue. We're deleting all of these files. So I'll give it a second to run. And while it's running, if our process was sitting there and reinserting the data into our table from the new Avro files, so again, we were just going to parse the new Avro file, and you can see files got parsed, and we can now see how many events there are. And yeah, of course, we will need to comment out that part. So we see 112,000 records. And then if we look at it ordered and grouped, we can see our deletions is running right here. Those are the blob deleted events grouped by from those events that are passing through. And as the final note, we'll just give it a second to finish and we'll look at the total counts, make sure everything matches. So we deleted about 6,000 right now. Okay. So it looks like we deleted all of the deletions that we needed to do. Let's take a look at what it looks like here. We'll see the data going to the Event Hub right there. And in the queue, we should see a whole bunch of messages. Let's see what that total number is, and we'll give it a minute to sync up. So 18956, okay. And then let's see if the Event Hub also saw exactly the same data. So what we need to do is, again, just run this, re-import everything up to now. This will just do a plain select, and we can see 18956. 18956. So every single event went into both locations, the queue and Event Hub. And now that it's an Event Hub, I can easily query it and see these were my blob deletion events right there. And the ones from yesterday were the blob creation events. So we can see kind of how quickly it was deleting, or we can do other analysis and obviously find each specific event, etc. So that is all I wanted to show here, is basically how to configure an Event Hub and in a queue as a destination for event-grade blob notification events, and most importantly, how to use Snowflake's, JSON parsing capabilities to easily process this data and import it. So if you have Avro files from Event Hub, they don't have to be this only from data that comes in from blob events, right? With a specific business logic for blob events is this parsing logic right here. But everything up until this point is generic enough where it can be used parsing out other JSON payloads in this body. So loading this into this table then allows me to query that table um, and parse out the information that I care about. That's it. Thank you very much for watching.